Welcome to Metro Talk. I'm Kent Scheffel. We're glad you're here. Pat Gowan's alongside. Pat's one of the editors with the Post-Dispatch. Welcome, Pat.
I can't.
And Jim Schrader, the publisher of the Telegraph, is here as well. Welcome, Jim.
And I'm glad I'm here too.
Good. Jim, the Illinois House has voted to lift the smoking ban in some casinos, those that border states that don't have the smoking ban. Is it time for that ban to be lifted in some casinos in Illinois?
I'm surprised they didn't exempt casinos from the get-go. As we've talked about on this show so many times before, gambling is an addictive behavior. We all know that. The people that liked, for example, to play slot machines usually like to do it with a mixed drink in one hand and a cigarette in the other hand, pulling the slot machines. There are exceptions to that, but it is an addictive behavior. I think the Illinois casino industry claims that the smoking ban in their casinos most drastically have affected the border state casinos. And I think that the number I read was $800 million over the course of this. In a time where the state of Illinois gets a pretty nice chunk of that $800 million that the casinos did not get, and our border states are picking it up. It's not like, okay, we don't offer smoking in Argosie's casino, so I won't gamble. It's, okay, they don't allow me to smoke on the floor at Argosy, I might run across the river to Ameristar or Harrah's or one of those casinos. So it's greatly affected Penn Gaming, which is the owner of Argosy, because they have two other casinos that are up in the Chicago area on the border with Indiana, also allows smoking in segments of their casinos. Even in Las Vegas, there are whole sections that are non-smoking, but there are whole sections where smoking is okay. I think the House is right, and a limited exemption for the casinos, though my guess is it will fail in the Senate unless they get some real revenue pressure to lift it because the state needs the money. But I think it'll probably fail in the Senate.
Why?
For one thing, there are fewer senators to go around, and the House of Representatives many times it's a little easier to kind of put together a deal with neighboring counties or neighboring districts with the House. In the Senate, my guess is the same thing that will happen when they pass this ban, which tried to exempt casinos from the beginning. The senators that have casinos in their area will support lifting the ban, but everybody else will kind of go with the flow and stick with the lobby of the anti-smokers, and my guess is it'll go to fail.
Pat, is it time to lift the smoking ban in casinos that border states that do allow smoking?
No state of the 35 states that have bans on smoking in general in public places, no state has ever backed off any provision of it. This would be the first time any state has gone backward and restored smoking in a place that had been made illegal, which is significant because it is a slippery slope. You've already told the fraternal organizations, for example, like the VFWs and the American Legions, it doesn't matter if you have no employees. It doesn't matter if everybody who works there is a member of the organization and willingly participates in an environment that smokes. You can't smoke there. The selling point for all this is the idea that employees have no choice. That maybe you've got a choice in whether you go to a bar or a restaurant or a place of business where smoking is permitted, but that employees have much less opportunity to choose, especially in a recession, and that therefore it's only fair to the employees not to force them to risk their health in a place where smoking is permitted. And essentially the legislature said to the employee, we don't care about your willingness to choose. It doesn't matter whether you're willing to work in a place that smokes or not. We're saying to protect your health, we're not going to allow that to happen. So even if it's in the interest of your pocketbook, it's not okay to work in a place that smokes. If they back up, now they're saying, well, the heck with your pocketbook. If it's important enough to our pocketbook as the state government, we don't care what happens to you. I think that's disingenuous. I think it's not only a slippery slope to create smoking in other places, but I think it's unfair to the employees. If I'm a waiter at a bar somewhere or a restaurant, and I choose to work at a place that does not permit smoking, it's probably easier for me to find comparable alternative employment than it would be if I worked in a casino. They're pretty well paid. In many parts of the state, they are the significant employer of the community. So I think people who don't want to work in a smoking environment would be just stuck. And I think it's sort of akin to prostitution. Well, it wasn't all right to do this till we got desperate, and now we're gonna sell our soul for the purpose of making revenue. By the way, that $800 million is the taxpayer's share. The first 3 years of this thing, the taxation on gambling in Illinois was down $800 million. The smoking ban started the 1st of January 2008. In the years 2008, 9, and 10, it's $800 million, closing in on $1 billion in tax revenue lost. Altogether, gambling is down about 30% in Illinois. Now, at the same time, we've had a recession. You might not have noticed, but we did. So it's probably not all on smoking, although a study done for the legislature of Illinois suggests that the largest component of that 30% drop has been smoking. So the Senate's going to feel that financial pressure Jim's talking about. You're talking about maybe an average of a $250 million a year. That's a lot of money in the state of Illinois.
As long as we're talking about financial pressure, Jim, your paper had 2 stories about the state budget last week. One said the House versus Senate on budget. The other headline was House versus Governor on 2010 spending. Are we getting any closer to solving the state's financial problems, or are we still at the bickering stage and haven't advanced enough yet to really have a solution?
I think we're still at the bickering stage, and we may be at the bickering stage even after we come up with a Band-Aid solution. Because in my opinion, that's what it will be, is a Band-Aid solution. The hole is just too deep. The budget is based on what has been described as conservative revenue estimates. And there are hopes that revenues will come in higher than that, though the first quarter, that hasn't happened as yet, the first 3 months of the calendar year of 2011. It's unfortunate that both of those headlines was House versus somebody. It was either versus their counterparts in the rest of the Capitol building in the Senate, or it was the House versus the administration, but it was a House versus somebody. It would be nice if we could get all 3 on the same playing field and try to hammer out a workable solution. The first step certainly was increasing the sales tax, or increasing the income tax, which certainly did not go over well with many people just because of the size of the increase. But we've still got a long way to go, and we still have a huge backlog of unpaid bills. The House and Senate can't even agree on how to do that. I happened to sit in a legislative luncheon yesterday where Representative Beiser, I think, explained it very well. We are paying basically 14.5% interest on unpaid debts to medical providers and so on and so forth, where we could borrow a comparable amount of money, satisfy those debts, and only pay 4% to borrow the money, and in actuality pick up 10% of $800 million overnight. But that can't be agreed to either. There's not enough votes to get it done through the House, I guess, and certainly not enough through the Senate. So we're still going to continue to bicker, but it's about time they knuckle down and come up with something, because the hole's getting deeper instead of getting shallower while they are bickering.
Pat, 2 headlines in the Telegraph last week. In one, the House is arguing with the Senate about the budget. In the other, the House is arguing with the governor about the budget. Are we getting any closer to settling all this?
Before you divide up the pie, you got to know how big the pie is. The House says the pie is $33.2 billion. The Senate says the pie is $34.2 billion. They're $1 billion apart on guesstimates as to the revenue. In case you're wondering what the governor thinks, he's suspended kind of in between the two. One of the problems that I'm seeing with all of this is a question of leadership. Right now in the Congress, a lot of people say, well, the House is more interested as a Republican body now in defeating Obama in the next election than they are in making real progress. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a knock that you can put on a divided Congress. We don't have a divided legislature. We have Democrat as the president of the Senate. We have a Democrat as the Speaker of the House. They have majorities that elected them. We have a Democrat for governor, and I'm wondering, where is the leadership? Why can't these guys get together? It's so bad that Madigan, the Speaker of the House, is talking about a coalition of Democrats from the House and Republicans from the Senate, because the House estimate of the revenue is more conservative than the Senate, so he thinks maybe in a conference committee, the Republicans in the Senate would side with his Democrats in the House. It's gotten to be almost more than an ordinary mortal can figure or bear. And in the end, we've got the 66% income tax increase. We've got Democrats in leadership position. If they don't show some leadership soon, then they're sort of abdicating, I think, their ability to say, vote for us, follow us, we'll get the job done, because they're not getting the job done.
We need to take a break. We'll take a look at the Caterpillar situation right after this.
Hi, I'm Audrey LaCasey, and I'm from Alton, Illinois. I love music, and that's why I came to Lewis & Clark. It's been an amazing experience here at Lewis & Clark, working with students that are so talented, coming from all over the area, and they work so hard to follow their dreams. The music faculty at Lewis & Clark they're fantastic, and they're there every step of the way to push you to follow your dreams. One of the unique opportunities that I have had at Lewis & Clark is being able to record my own music with a fellow student here. Being able to record our music has opened doors for us in the music industry. My long-term goal is to finish here at Lewis & Clark and then to transfer to a four-year school and finish my degree in music performance. I would recommend Lewis & Clark to another student because it is definitely a great place to get started, and it can open so many doors for you.
Big dreams and good grades aren't enough to get into college. There are actual steps you need to take. Finding someone who can help is the first and most important. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.
This is Metro Talk. I'm Kent Scheffel. Jim Schrader and Pat Gowan are here. Pat, the Caterpillar Corporation is based in Illinois, has 23,000 employees here, and the president of the company has sent a letter to the governor saying, maybe time to leave the state. He's concerned about the cost of doing business in Illinois and says he's willing to talk with the governor to see what can be worked out, if anything. Bottom line here, will we see changes in the business climate in Illinois when a company the size of Caterpillar starts making noise?
Well, they have announced, the governor and the CEO of Caterpillar, they're going to sit down and meet and talk about their differences. And the Caterpillar fellow is saying, this has been over-reported. I didn't say we were going to pull up stakes and leave. I was saying it's bad for the business climate. I'd like to talk to the government about what's going on. And it is bad for the business climate when the taxes go up. It's also bad for the business climate when the services of the state fall out from under you. 23,000 employees are going to be hard to keep when the times get better if the education system isn't in place to educate their children, or if there aren't bridges to connect one end of the river to the other end of the river because it fell down, we can't afford to put it back up again. These are all trade-offs. It's very easy for people to simplify a problem like we've got and say, well, it's all about taxes. Essentially, it almost boils down to what President Reagan called trickle-down economics, that President Bush, his vice president, later president, would refer to as voodoo economics. They were somewhat disproven that the free market will simply trickle down all the money that you need to all segments of the economy in taxes and what have you. And there's probably some degree of truth to it, but that's not purely not purely honest, and we can't let the services all go, or business is going to flee as well. There'll always be a reason. And if you pull up 23,000 jobs and take your caterpillars into another state, there's nothing to say that dire conditions in that state, and every state's got dire conditions, that state isn't going to raise its income tax 6 months later, and you're going to end up in the same situation you're in. You know, the best business people know how to ride out storms, and there are all kinds of storms, and this is maybe a little different kind of storm than they're used to, but it's a storm nonetheless, and they can't operate in a state that doesn't have a state. So they ought to talk about their differences, they ought to talk about getting things together. I would be flabbergasted if Caterpillar were to pull up and leave Illinois.
Jim?
Well, you know what was interesting to me? When they announced that the president of Caterpillar and Governor Quinn were going to sit down and talk this morning, in the same news release...
We're taping on Tuesday.
We're taping on Tuesday. In the same news release, they also announced that the two of them would appear in a joint press conference at the Paradise Casino in Peoria today. Now, that implies to me that something's already been worked out in advance. Otherwise, the governor's not going to go in there blind and then stand next to the president of Caterpillar at the dais at the Paradise Casino saying, yeah, we've decided to move. No, Governor Quinn's not going to be there for that. So they've worked out something ahead of time.
Maybe the CEO is just going to stand at the Paradise and say, gosh, I wish I could have a cigarette.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. I would be more concerned about Caterpillar moving operations to a foreign country than I would be to another state, for the reasons that Pat just gave. There's not a state in the United States that's really solvent right now that's in good shape. Even the states like Nevada, which for years needed no income tax because they just were fat and happy and had all the money they wanted, they're in trouble now too. I would be more concerned about some of those 23,000 employees being displaced either in parts or manufacturer of parts to a foreign country than I would be to another state. Something's going to be worked out. On one side, we may say we're going to raise your corporate tax by 70%, but then we're going to hand out incentives on the other side to keep you happy in Peoria. So Caterpillar's not moving to another state.
We need to take a break. We'll have more right after this.
Hello and welcome to the Lewis and Clark Minute. Today we're going to check out the radio broadcasting program in WLCA with Mike Lemons.
Have you ever listened to your favorite radio station or your favorite disc jockey and say, you know, I could do that? Or maybe you're the type of person who says, I could never do something like that. Well, with the help of first-year mass comm student John, we're going to show you just how easy it is. Each voice intro starts with talking about the band that just played, and we add a station identifier. Next, you want to offer some information that may be of interest to your audience. And finally, tell the listeners what the next song is, who sings it, followed by another station identifier. John will do one live now.
Silver Sun Pickup Substitution on WLCA. The Big Pink released their debut album called A Brief History of Love. This single is off that album. It's The Big Pink with Dominoes. It's on College Radio's Best 89.9.
This has been your Lewis and Clark Minute.
What's that? I don't know. Something I kind of made. Ooh, what's it do?
What do I do? Well, thanks for asking. I ring my bell and I like to dance. What do I do? Well, thanks for asking.
Ow! Yeah, it still needs a little work.
Anything's possible. Keep thinking. Get started on your own inventions or just play some games at inventnow.org.
Sounds like you could use some Van Gogurt. It's fortified with arts-rich nutrients to improve your math and reading skills. Catch!
Van Gogurt, thanks. So what's the deal with your ear?
Always with the ear, huh?
Feed your kids the arts. For 10 simple ways to learn how, visit AmericansForTheArts.org.
This is Metro Talk. I'm Kent Scheffel. Jim Schrader and Pat Gowan are alongside. Jim, Missouri Lieutenant Governor Peter Kinder has been staying at the Chase Park Plaza Hotel in St. Louis, the Four Seasons in St. Louis. Since 2006, he has spent, or taxpayers have spent, more than $35,000 in nights at hotels for the lieutenant governor. Should he be staying someplace that's not as expensive? Is that out of line? Is there a problem here?
Well, there was an excellent story in the Sunday Post-Dispatch, and I forget I don't know if it was one of your guys or not. I forget the
Jake Wagman.
Jake Wagman.
Main political correspondent.
Great story. Just basically through Freedom of Information, got the records, the travel records for Lieutenant Governor Kinder, who would like to be Governor Kinder. I think he's has a campaign committee already put together to launch for that seat. 300 dates over the 3 years that you talked about traveling to St. Louis. Some of those would be what we would call legitimate state business trips, but many of them were fundraisers, baseball games. There were, I think there was a trip to see the Fox or the Muni or something. There were all kinds of these trips that got pretty shaky pretty quick if you tried to tie state business to it. I think he hung up on your reporter when the reporter tried to interview Lieutenant Governor Kinder, and basically said that it was a hatchet job by the Post-Dispatch. But the next morning he was on KMOX defending himself. Subsequently, I read this morning in the Post that Governor Kinder has worked out a deal where when his overnight stays in St. Louis, he'll be staying in a condominium in St. Louis rather than the hotels that you were talking about. And that will be paid for by his campaign committee, his election funds, and he will no longer be charging the taxpayers for that. Again, I don't think there's any problem with it if it's legitimate state business, which gets a little foggy around any time you have a candidate that's running for election or re-election. Some of the ties to legitimate state business get pretty fuzzy. But Lieutenant Governor Kinder, while admitting no mistakes were made on his part, has agreed to find some other way to spend nights in St. Louis, not at the taxpayers' expense.
Pat, was too much money being spent when Lieutenant Governor Kinder of Missouri started staying at the Chase Park Plaza and the Four Seasons in St. Louis?
Well, not mine to say, except we shine a bright light on it, and we see what we see, and the readers see what they see. Even newer news, the taxpayers haven't lost anything because Kinder's campaign is now going to reimburse the state of Missouri the $35,000. Admitting no wrongdoing, they did nothing at all wrong, but they're going to give the money back. Couple things catch me about that. One is that, of course, this claim that there was no wrongdoing, but we're going to give back $35,000 anyway. Another is that in announcing that he was going to stay in a condo paid for by his campaign, he, I understand, has made a comment, he's quoted in the paper as making a comment with it that, well, we can't afford it, but we're going to do it anyway. Now, it was interesting that his needs of staying in St. Louis are so great that the taxpayers can afford it, but his campaign can't afford it. He does not appear to have made much of an effort to try to defend these trips as being essential to his duties. I mean, he says they are, but if you look at the kinds of things he was doing, he was attending various rallies and dinners and events and Tea Party rallies. He is a Republican who's been outspoken about saving the taxpayers' money, cutting the waste, cutting everywhere you can, that government's bad and it spends too much money. The guy got caught up in the only political crime there is. There is only one political crime, and that's the political crime of hypocrisy. Now, whether he's really a hypocrite, not mine to say, but there are now detractors who are saying, what is hypocrisy? Saying, save the taxpayers every dime you can, but it's okay for me to spend $35,000 on hotel rooms in the St. Louis area for events that have questionable official connection. It's a foil to what happened with the Democrat Senator Claire McCaskill with her airplane on which she returned like $80,000 to the government, which would have been charged for trips that there were questions about whether the government should have been charged to her campaign, and the question about whether she paid her personal property tax in Missouri on the plane, although unlike Kinder, she admitted that she was wrong in not paying the tax, and apparently there was no gotcha to it. She exposed herself about it, so give her credit for that. But the Republicans are trying to heap hypocrisy on top of her with this sort of levels that playing field. They're not running against each other for anything, but at the same time, it's an embarrassment, I think, to the Republican Party in in Missouri and to Lieutenant Governor Kinder. And but I guess it all goes away now. He's going to stay in a condo. He's given 35 grand back, and no damage was done, no wrongdoing was done. I took a property tax deduction on my income taxes, by the way, this year for the property tax I paid. It was proper, no wrongdoing was done, and I'm not giving the money back.
You know, this is not the
Let me
first
call that
time.
IRS agent.
Yeah, that's right. This is not the
Perfectly legal, but if it's perfectly legal, why would I, it was all right, why would I give the money back? I mean, that's sort of the question that comes up.
This is not the first politician to use some kind of fuzzy rules to justify staying in a nice place. According to the story, Kinder was extended the government rate of $120 a night, which for the Four Seasons or Chase Park Plaza, either one, is pretty cheap, because none of us would get that book rate if we tried to walk in and book a night for the weekend. But to me, and it wasn't really necessary because the aspersions were being cast anyway. I would also like to know what was spent on transportation and meals over and above the $35,000 for a hotel room, because any of us who've eaten at the Chase Park Plaza, and with me, it's been many, many years, but it's not like picking up a sandwich at the Quick Trip. If you're going to eat a meal there, it's not an inexpensive meal. So my guess would be, by the time you factor in travel that the taxpayers still paid for, again, Kinder hasn't admitted that he did anything, but if the taxpayers still paid for his travel and still paid for his meals, I'll bet that $35,000 is double in those 300 stays, because it doesn't take long when you're traveling from Jeff City at the government allowed 53 cents a mile or whatever it is now, and meals at 60 or 70 bucks a head, which would not be uncommon at the Chase or the Four Seasons, either one. I'll bet it's double that.
Right. For the record, I've raised the question in columns multiple times, primarily in Illinois. Why in the world do we have a lieutenant governor? I don't know what that office costs in Illinois now, but it used to be about $3 million a year. It's probably somewhat less. But some states don't have it. The line of succession from governor goes to attorney general. We don't need to replace the governor very often, although we did sort of recently. But
we didn't have to
pretty rare.
replace the lieutenant governor. We did just fine with that seat empty.
Not only didn't have to, there's no provision for it. The
Right.
Constitution makes no provision for doing it. You cannot replace a lieutenant governor who's incapacitated or which raises a question about
Whether or not you need one.
You don't need one because you don't even have to have one. So I don't know whether people in Missouri are going to be talking about the same sort of thing, but the same sort of question occurs. Why in the world even have the office? It doesn't have much of any duties attached to it. Apparently not in Missouri either.
Whole nother ball game, but we'll save that ball game for later. That's going to do it for this edition of Metro Talk. I'm Kent Shuffle. Thanks for being with us. Jim Schrader, the publisher of the Telegraph, has been here, along with Pat Gowan, one of the editors with the Post-Dispatch. We'll see you next time.